Hey Marietta, so I'm back again with chapter 2 of Against Nature. I woke early with the all confusion to an empty apartment. All senses were blunt and worn, ground down from misuse. My flat had the stale smell of neglect. Of late, it was used for stopovers, a change of clothes, a remembering book. I spent the occasional night when Juliet and Stevie were out in the Hamptons without me, but I more or less taken up residence at their eight-figure loft on 13th Street, which was roughly 8 times the size of my one-bedroom cave 4 blocks away. I rolled over and sought the warmth of the one being I could depend on. All that was left was his ghost. Elvis died a few months back. He wasn't young, but I thought we had a few more years together. He never quite recovered from the beating on the night of the double murder at my apartment. The night it was almost a triple when Cass flatlined in the ambulance. The hound healed from his kick in his ribs and the internal bleeding, and he laid by my side every day as we put ourselves back together again. There were plenty of nights when his loyalty was the only thing that kept me from swallowing down a pit of Drano and being done with it. Instead, I rubbed his belly on the couch and turned the pages of another book full of blood and suffering, taking a solace in the sheer misery. Until one day in September, when I woke beside him in bed and he didn't stir. Elvin died peacefully in the night, pressed against my side. There are worse ways to go. I spent the week on a blow blender, staying at the street, staying at the Saint Mark Hotel, afraid to return to my dog-free apartment. When Juliet contacted me through none other than Margaret McKay, I took it as an omen. I accepted the case in the hope that the McKay curse would ruin me further. The coke hangover left me a jangle, depressed mess. I took it out on her lover, Britt. At Percy, one night, I confronted him in front of a dozen colleagues. I pretended to be the arranged husband of a woman he was screwing. I shoved him across the table and told his dinner companion that he'd given my soon-to-be ex herpes, threatened castrated if he ever came near her again. If Evans had been alive, I wouldn't have stayed over at the Cohen apartments quite so often. I would have had the good sense to get away from her and kept my distance. But in my lost home was a space to be avoided. So I accepted her invitation to stay. Awakened with a rump each morning until the envelopes flattened and her son grew used to seeing me at the breakfast table. It was at an untenable position, but I can't say I resisted glide settling. I always wanted to be rich again. Those environments just hours removed seemed like a lost dream. Reality was my tiny flat on East 17th Street, the basement rental of the elderly Miss Pett, who will soon be joining Elvis in the ground. I often wondered what would come of his brownstone when he was gone. It was an 1880 beauty with all the original accents and crown molding and pocket doors. The kitchen and the bathroom needed an overhaul, but it would be criminal if it fell into the hands of a murderous bastard who gutted the place. I knew my days in the golden handcuffs below market rent would soon be coming to an end. Mr. Pat, closet into his 80s of spite, the acceptance of all around him, had no heirs I knew of. We were friendly enough. I didn't mind when he watched me out in the garage, shirtless on hot summer days, and he had once worked for my father before the fall, which explained the sympathy rent he charged me. Still, I doubted I'd be making the will. I was just lucky I wasn't evicted after his home turned into a homicide crime scene during the McKay case. I limped through the walking process, dressed and reached for my leash that still hung on the door side hook. I could smell Elvis scent on the harness. Thought about heading straight to the closet animal shelter and adopting the first rescue I saw, but it still felt disrespectful to the hound. So I walked around the block by myself, stopping at all his favorite trees marked forever. It was a fine spring day, the blossom bursting day after the last Kentucky Derby, won by a rare filly called Smiley Eyes. Cass would appreciate that she had a fondness for the ponies that I failed to grasp. Triple Crown season was always her favorite time of the year. I thought of her up in the mountains in love, a world away from the urban prison she escaped, and now heartbroken after her man jumped to his death. She didn't believe it could be voluntarily, but that was his natural human response. It shattered every narrative. She thought she found peace after all the violence I put her through. Found a man she allowed herself to love. I hated the dead guy already. What was his name again? Victor Wingate. The name rang a faint bell. When I returned home, I Googled him. Found the broad search stroke of his past. Wingate was a writer, a magazine journalist of some renown, renown, with one book to his credit. It was called Walk Through the Fire, the story of a 1920 boxer named Eddie Finn, a former light heavyweight champ. Wait a minute, y'all. Ooh. Ooh. The reviews claim Finn's life was like an ancient Irish fable, and that Wingate captured his story with masculine prose suited to the subject. It sold well enough, and then it was adapted into a film of the same name, earned a handful of Oscar nominations. Dylan provided the theme song, a haunting dirge called The Bell, which I remember playing a lot back then. A good book, a better movie. It was enough to set a writer up for a while. It appeared Wingate hadn't worked much since. The most recent byline I could find was from 3 years ago. It was a Village Voice orbit of a fellow writer. I checked the bus schedule and found a 5 p.m. out of the Port Authority, arriving in a town called Panaville a little after 8. Cass said she lived up the nearby mountains. I checked my phone and found nothing from Juliet. Whatever she decided to tell her son, I knew it wouldn't be the truth. I knew he already hated me. It happened that way. I promised myself to try to reach out to the kid and set the record straight when I return. I take him to a Knick game and we'll talk it through man to man. Just because things didn't work out between your mom and me doesn't mean we can't hang. I was still in touch with one of my mother's old lovers, an alcoholic named Dr. David Burt. I saw this counsel on certain cases. I envisioned Stevie and me like that. Once he was grown and jaded too. Yeah, right. Whatever you need to tell yourself. I knew I just become another failed father figure in the poor kid's life. Poor, please. The boy had a trust fund in the hundreds. He'll be fine. Better off without the series of damaging meal that will pass through his privileged life. I left an hour early for the bus, leaving some bonus time for a few bills at a remember bar nearby. The West 40s had always been my least favorite part of the city. It's the filthy armpit of DeJohnny Island, Mass. Years ago, the New York Times erected its new headquarters across the street from the bus station in a move that declared the true statue of the newspaper business in the 21st century. The building looked like a grown-up jungle gym. Indeed, overgrown men, children, have been resting for trying to scale its clement rod facade. To the north, where the tourist horrors of Times Square and its eternal lightness 1 Avenue West, over on Ninth, the neighborhood known as Hill's Kitchen, continued to live down to his name. There were ugly erections of glasses and steel condos where raised tenements used to be, and the rents were souring like everywhere else, but the developments weren't fooling anyone. It was still aptly named Hell's Kitchen. It just had more character when it was an infested mass of pawn shops and prostitutes and transit commuter pubs. The one I remember was called Ruby's, between West 44th and 45th. Drinkers were offered free hot dog from behind the bar. It was still standing. Out front there was a large waving plastic pig dressed in a red jacket and black brown bow tie. Inside it felt like a good place for a slow, pleasant death. There were cracked red leather banquets along the wall, facing a warm bar populated by a few day drinking regulars. Above the cash register was a sign that advertised Ruby stimulus package, a shot of Bushmill and a pint of Ruby's own blonde draft for $5. I ordered it along with a hot dog. The Irish whiskey was just right. The beer and the dog were not. There were sips and two bites. No, three sips and two bites, and I headed for the restroom in the back. Not the way to prepare for a 3-hour ride. On the way out, I was grateful for the jukebox come to life. Some warm soul had put Sam Cooke's Cupid. I defy anyone to name a finer voice in human history than the beautiful Mr. Cook. He lightened my spirits and settled my stomach, and I moved down the bar, humming along with an easy smile. Hey, sugar, said a slurpy voice to my left. I turned to find a large black prostitute in a tight red dress that matched the garnished banquet. She mimmed a bow in the Earl as Sam's song about letting it go, give me a wink. Care to join me? She asked. I shrugged, slid in next to her. She placed a hand over her ample chest and started to sing, straight to my lover's heart for me. Buy me a drink, she asked after the chorus. What are you drinking, honey? The stimulus package, I said. She wrinkled her nose. No wonder you weren't rushing to the bathroom. She laughed a thick and throaty laugh. I'll take a Bushmill, skip the rut gut on top. I agreed, went back to the bar, returned with two more of the Irish blend. Cheers, we said, and downed them. What's your name, baby? She asked. Duck, I said. You? She pretended to wobble in her seat. I'm Melody. She leaned in, touched my hand. So, Mr. Duck, you meeting anybody, or you here all by yourself today? Sadly solo, I told her. Just killing some time before my bus. How much time you got? Her thick fingers circled the rims of the short glass. She licked their painted purple lips. Not enough time to satisfy the likes of you, I said. She gave me a jasmine smile, reached over and squeezed my hand. Sugar, it ain't about me. I want to satisfy you. Sorry, I got a place right down the way, she said. I get you to your bus on time, don't you worry. The jukebox DJ was sticking with Sam. Everybody loves the cha-cha came next. I looked into my empty glass, then up in her glassy eyes. The pupils were dilated. The whiskey wasn't the only thing coursing through her system. She kept on smiling through glistering lips. The tips of her tongue danced against her upper teeth. I felt a hand sliding up my inner thigh. Nothing stirred in me, and I felt embarrassed by what she wouldn't find. Then her face was flooded in a flash of daylight. Melody raised her other arm and blocked her eyes, waited for the bar door to shut and darken to the return. I glanced back at the new patron. He was a well-built, good-looking guy, around 30. Shaved head, broad shoulders, tattooed sleeves snaked up both arms. His jeans and blank white t-shirt looked fresh off the shelf. So did his smile. It was a cocky smirk that announced physical confidence. A guy who hoped to brush shoulders on the way past. He moved with a slight shuffle, like an athlete trying to walk off an injury. When he reached our table, he stopped and looked down at us. The smile widened. Duck, he asked. Melody removed her hand from my thigh, inches away from me. No stranger to bad vibes. Wrong guy, I said. We looked up at each other until he blinked. His eyes were lit for action. Up close, he had the handsome vacancy of an actor. His face was well proportioned, muscular. He'd get through a few rounds of casting. Beneath the chin, before the tattoos began, there was a thin scar along his neck, the kind left by a blade. I had a few of them my own. I didn't want to know where he got his. Yes, you duck Dottie. What's going on, man? His accent was distant, German or Australian, something Central European. He pushed himself into the booth, pinned a man in the middle. He stared across at Melody. Beat it, he said. I grabbed her wide thighs and squeezed. She's with me, I said, and I don't know you. Melody started to squirm from my grips, then looked from the bald stranger back to me. Made her choice. The fuck are you? She asked him. What's good, rude boy? Told you to beat a slut, he said, leaning in for the challenge. He said it low, but the whole bar seemed to hear. The room quiet and grew tense like someone had just shouted the N-word, and now hell is breath for the reputations. For the first time in a long time, I moved through some accolade, progression in my mind. I was out of practice and out of shape, softened by rich living. Unlike the specimen who looked weird, wired, and primed for these encounters, the scar said enough. I placed both elbows on the small table between us and pressed my hands together beneath my chin. Breathed through my nose, slowed my heart rate, and tried to focus on the calm before the storm, before the coming chaos. You think you know me, I asked. Sure do, he said. Lawrence Duck Dottie. Everybody knows you. You're famous. I'm a fan of your work. Among the mess of dragons and skull tattoos up his arm, I noticed an iron across and the letter NSM, the initial of the National Socialist Movement. On the knuckles of his right hand, the number 1488 was inked and golfed it tight. I remember the hate numbering from my days inside. The number 14 alludes to the 14 word philosophy of white supremacist group. Something about securing a future for white children. The number 88 was a stand in for HH, with H being the eighth letter of the alphabet. Thus, 88 was the equivalent of the Hail Hitler salute. A real subtle prince, this one. Like my ink, he asked with a grin. At least you're upfront about it, I said. Inside, did you only take white cock? He stiffened. Blonde rushed to his clean-shaven face. No, blood rushed through his clean-shaven face. The next scar seemed to thicken. Okay, I'm almost finished. You want me to make your move and get messy? I asked. Or do you want to make your point first? You're already an errand boy. He set both palms flat on the table. A vein pulsed at his temples. Our glasses shook at his knees, jackhammer beneath us. Somehow he restrained himself. There's no need to be rude, he said. I just wanted to introduce myself. He stuck out a bony hand. I let it hang. I'm Oliver. I read all about you. You can read, good for you. I read about your friend. I read about your friend too, he said. The one who likes the whips and chains, yeah. What's her name? Cassandra? My heart rate spiked at the sound of her name. I felt every fiber tense. You going to see her? He asked. Up in the mountains. You don't want to miss your bus. He looked at a tatted wrist with no watch. Then he slid from the booth and pierced down at me. Tell her to be careful, he said. Both of y'all be careful. As you might have heard some things, they're not worth it, yeah. I watched his wide back as he walked down the bar without another look. I climbed out and followed. As the door opened and daylight flooded in, I caught sight of another man waiting for him outside. Tall and trim, he was dressed in a slim fitted gray suit. Shades covered most of his face. He nodded to Oliver and looked over his shoulders to me. I caught the door as it tried to swing shut. Hey, rough guy, I called. Where you think you're going? Oliver turned with a grin, like I was giving him just what he would hope for. The man put a hand on his shoulder. He shook it off, stepped towards me. You want to tell me how you know Cass and me? I asked. I told you, you're famous. As he moved closer, he seemed to inflare. It's like that with practice fighters. The most undersized scraper can seem like a UFC heavyweight champ when he's coming in with blood on his breath. Oliver had that scent. Fear was a foreign concept, but it is made for dealing with men like him. It's all about turning aggression on his head, using force against itself. As he charged, I received him, already anticipating his reaction to mine. A chess match moving at high speed with higher stakes. There are over 10,000 names, techniques in the art. I remember maybe a couple of dozen. Inside a cage alone at night, I would have been doomed. But out on Manhattan Day time sidewalk with cops lurking at every corner, I needed one good move to protect myself and make my point. Like a Matator, I stepped side of him, stole his energy, and delivered a wheeled thrown that sent him crashing into the bar front peg. Before he could scamper up and charge again, I went to the older man, grabbed his wrist, and twisted behind his back. He didn't resist, and though the pressure point exert extreme pain, he never flinched. Who the fuck are you? I asked in his ear. You shouldn't have done that, he said. My associate is not well. If I had to ask you again, this arm is broken. A siren interrupted our street fighting drama. Put your hands up, and a voice from inside the car released them. I did as instruction. A pair of uniformed scurried out with guns drawn. We were forced to our knees with our hands behind our heads. A pedestrian approach told the officer that I was acting in self-defense. He was a scrawny college kid who said he watched the whole thing go down. He said he was taking Taekwondo and that he recognized my moves. The cop asked us to explain. Neither said as much to say. Neither side had much to say. Before the boys could get irritated and take us for the disturbance of the peace, another call came. Shots fired in Times Square. They told us to go our separate ways, waited to see me across the street, then sped off. When I doubled back, they were gone. And y'all, these chapters are long, so I will be back with chapter 3. Bye, my reactors.